welcome to our last class. It is our last Mindfulness in an Anxious World class in this battery of classes we'll be having, and at the end maybe I'll discuss with you a little bit about where we'll go in the future with other classes. But I want to thank all of you, and I'll thank you again at the end. But all those that are here, there are some of you who get a gold star. You have not missed a single class, which is awesome. And there's, of course, many watching at home, those who are watching on YouTube and listening on the different podcasts. I'm amazed, thousands of people, literally since the beginning of this class, we have had about 40 to 45, depending on the platform, 45,000 people listening to this class. So it's just absolutely amazing to think the number of people that have been reached. And I ask you to continue to promote it and to share it. It's all there. You can listen to it. As there's only 9 classes, some people are just catching up. Tonight's class, we're going to be taking all the mindfulness stuff that we've been talking about, and we're going to bring it down to the absolute practical. I always like to end with something, how can I practice this in my normal everyday life, and how will it improve for me the more important things in my life? And for all of us, one of the most important things are what? The 2 things that we did not lose in the Garden of Eden, the 2 things that were given to us at the very foundation of the creation of mankind: relationship and work. Now, a lot of times people look at work as though it's a curse, but it's not. Work is a gift. Not just work like professional work, but all the work that we do. Creative work, social work, friend work, all the play, that's all work. It's all some form of that. So what did I say in the beginning of the class is one of the biggest problems that we have? Loneliness. Okay, that's a lack of true good relationships, which causes anxiety. And then also one of the other causes of problems with anxiety really also comes from the fact that we're not working well. And I could say that most of us would probably agree that a lot of our anxiety comes out of our work. So with all the stuff that I teach, I rarely can tell you where I get it all, because I'm just piecing it together through years of experience, teaching, education, learning, constant reading. With tonight's class, I can actually tell you where I'm getting the vast majority of my stuff, from a couple of sources. The first is from the optimal work methodology that was put together and created by a Dr. Kevin Majors. Dr. Majors and I actually went to undergraduate together at the University of Dallas, and now he is a Harvard Med School psychiatrist, a professor at Harvard, who does a lot of work regarding mindfulness, regarding different ways, cognitive functionality, and how we can work optimally. He's got a great website, optimalwork.com, so you can go to that, and I will put that on my website, holiness.work, because I think it's a fantastic resource for further information about this, as well as more in-depth talks that he gives, as well as great podcasts that he also has. And there's also even questions, you can sign into the website and have an account that helps you work better. So there's that, as well as I was blessed to be able to go visit him some years ago, and we spent a couple of days together going through this methodology and really training in it and learning in it. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, whose last name I will not even try to spell for you, but I know I pronounced it right, I believe. And he did a great work called Flow, his book Flow. Highly recommend that. Carol Dweck did a lot of work, and you'll hear me talk about her throughout this talk. And then Angela Duckworth did a lot regarding grit and perseverance and things. So I'm kind of pooling all that together, along with a lot of stuff and kind of formation, especially by St. Jose Maria Escrivá on the sanctification of work. So I'm taking psychology, social sciences, practical living, and spirituality, and blending them together in this talk. I also want to recommend in the beginning, this is a great talk for high school and college students. So those of you who are watching at home, grab your college and high school students and have them listen. And if not, you're listening to this, obviously live, we have who we have here. But if you're going to be listening to the podcast, it's really great to be able to recommend this to students, because I think it's going to be a huge help for students and for young professionals, especially just beginning their professional life. Because we need to constantly be sharpening the saw, okay, as Stephen Covey would talk about, constantly sharpening the saw, constantly growing in our professional toolbox. It's very important. One of the sad things, I always find that sad, is if I go to someone's house and I see the books on their shelves, and it's all the books that they had in college, and there's nothing more. That's all that, like, the last time they read a book was in college. That's sad, that's pathetic, okay? So please, keep reading, keep growing, all right? That being said, let's talk about our anxiety for a minute. As I said before, a lot of anxiety comes from loneliness and a lack of true, authentic social engagement. We talked a lot about that. Now tonight we can talk about a lot of our anxiety comes from work and procrastination. Procrastination is basically motivated by fear. Fear of failure and fear of success. Now people are like, what do you mean fear of failure? I understand that. Why fear of success? Well, because if I succeed, then more might be required of me. Or if I succeed, there's a real fear that what will happen is that eventually I'll have the imposter syndrome kicks in, and people are going to really learn that I'm actually not capable of the things they think I'm capable of doing. Those two things, fear of failure, fear of success, and imposter syndrome, those really compete in our mind to procrastinate, to put stuff aside, which inevitably causes anxiety. Okay. What is it we all want? But think about it, no matter what our religion is, this is a great way, obviously, of approaching any human person, is that all of us want to be happy. We want to have a fulfilling life that is full, that is rich, that has meaning. Every person wants to be fully alive. Where does most depression come from? When someone feels as though they're not only able, but capable of being fully alive. And that's where we start to despair and be afraid. So boredom, sadness, loneliness, they're all real realities, but a lot of them come out of a lack of knowing how to work. I think it's a sad thing. Our school system, and then I'm going to be very controversial here because as an educator, I can say this. Most schools miserably fail their students because they teach them what to learn, but not how to learn. They teach them things to learn, and most of the time say, learn this, be able to regurgitate it on a test, but they don't teach them how to incorporate it into their life and to continue the process of learning. I remember when I went to the University of Dallas, the thing that actually sold me on the school is they said, we're going to teach you how to learn, not just now, but for the rest of your life. And I'm so thankful for the education that I got, that liberal arts education, because I'm constantly educating myself. You know, Thomas Jefferson, when you go to the University of Virginia, at the university, they'll say, you know, they ask, like, what year are you? They don't say a freshman, a sophomore, they say first year, second year, third year, and thing. And people make fun of them and say it's obnoxious. But I like that because Thomas Jefferson meant that, like, you could, like, I'm in my, 38th year. Like, you just keep going. No, when did I start being educated? Well, clearly not in mathematics, but I'm in my 48th year of life. So I'm the year 48 of learning, right? You never stop learning. Okay. What does that help us do? It helps us to live a full life. Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving. You have to live, like Auntie Mame said. It's so true. So the way we work, the way I work, is the way I live. Because, as I said, relationships and my work, we won't stop working in heaven either. People think, I'm going to go to heaven and it's going to be a big retirement. No, that's not true. If work is my fulfillment, what's my work going to be? What's going to be liturgia? What does liturgia mean? What does liturgy mean? Public work. So if I'm going to spend the rest of eternity praising God, my work is going to be one of adoration and gratefulness. Which ultimately, if I have adoration and gratefulness in my life, I actually live a very fulfilled life here. Well, it means in heaven it's going to be perfected in that. I'm made for that. So the way I work is the way I live. If I'm working at my best, then I live at my best. Which is beautiful to think. That's why, if you go on an extended vacation, usually about halfway through vacation, people say, I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to go back. That's when people say I'm retired. After about like a couple of months of retirement, maybe people have plans, they travel, but after a couple of months of retirement, a lot of people are like, employ me, like give me something to do. I find a lot of wives usually say like, I promised to spend the rest of my life with him, but I never said that I would spend breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him. Like, please, like, go do something. Go get out of that. Give me part of my day back, right? That kind of thing. So the meaning of our life is ultimately linked to the meaning of our work. And I don't necessarily mean my profession. My profession doesn't give me meaning. I remember my dad used to tell me, he goes, look, actors, what he said, actors and ball players have careers. Everybody else has jobs. Like, so our job is not the thing that gives us our meaning. Our job merely is one aspect of the work that we perform. Work is ordering and sustaining effort. So I'm made to be in movement, okay? So I need to order and sustain my effort. And to work at my best, I need order, I need intensity, and I need constancy. Those three things actually help me to work well. And so to perform any task at our best depends on the level of mindful focus that I have on that task. And we've felt this before. Like when I'm distracted, when I'm preoccupied, my work is not fulfilling. When I'm totally focused, the quality of my work is proportional to the focus that I have. So for instance, I know for me, one thing I love to do is I love to paint. And I go into my art studio and I start to paint. And I could waste 5 or 6 hours in there and not even know. Like I won't even realize the time. Because I'm just so focused on that thing that I really enjoy. I'm allowed to be creative. Happens when I write homilies and things like that. I just lose myself in it because I enjoy it. I'm in the state of flow. We're going to talk a lot about that flow tonight. The highest state of focus is flow. When we're in that state of flow, I work intensely towards a goal, like I have a goal, without any effort wasted. I'm not fighting distractions or impulses. And by the way, I'm going to teach you tonight how to train yourself to enter into the state of flow. It's that moment where I lose myself in the task. And it's an intentional state. It's basically mindfulness in momentum. And that's why I wanted to do this last tonight. We've been talking about mindfulness and life and finding peace. Now you're going to see how it all ties together into living a fulfilled life. And mindfulness exercises is just one part of that. So, what are some of the obstacles? I'm going to talk about 3 obstacles tonight that keep us from working at our best. There's 3 things that are deadly for working well. And I've talked about some of these throughout, but I'm going to be very specific tonight. The first is working with a negative attitude toward the task at hand. In other words, complaining. The second one is multitasking. Multitasking is utterly deadly to happiness. And that's why so few people are happy today in our modern world, because we've got the biggest distracting device possible in our pocket all the time. And then the third, not challenging ourselves sufficiently within any task so that I get bored or easily distracted with that. It's one, and I'll talk about that. So I'm sure your experiences prove this. I wake up and I immediately start to dread the day, let's say. Okay, maybe today you experience that. It's a little rainy, it's cold here in Virginia, it's a little cooler than we're used to, and you just wake up and you're like, oh, crap. I got what? And then I go, I got this and that, and then all of a sudden we go through the laundry list. So we start to complain. We complain about the test, the paper. We complain that we've got to, clean up the garage, whatever it might be. And I sit down to work, and as soon as I sit down to work, I have my phone right next to me, which means that I'm multitasking. I'm switching back and forth from email to work to media, or I switch back and forth between one idea and another idea. And because I'm not focused on a predetermined, definite task, then nothing is solidified in my mind. And then I listen to music, or people come into the office and they ask a question and they poke their head in. It's one of the reasons, by the way, why during COVID, people all, pretty much across the board, most people said, I was way more productive working from home because I don't have all the distractions at work. Or, others are around, and then I sit down to study, but with a limited task list, and I find it boring, so I pull up a YouTube video or whatever it might be, or I don't break my task down, and I start to get overwhelmed and confused. Oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And it's the panic starts. So we either have too little to do and we get bored, or too much to do and we get anxious. And by the way, almost everything I'm talking about tonight, you can apply to temptation as well, not just distraction of work. All right, so let's look at these obstacles. Obstacle number 1 is that working with a negative attitude. And I'm going to go back to the way our brain works for a lot of things today. Kind of now that you've become a specialist and you've been watching this, all of you are cognitive behavioral therapists now, all of you are neurobiologists. Now you'll understand what I'm talking about. So when I say it for the second and third time, you won't be as confused. So our nervous system responds to challenges in different ways. All of us have a nervous system. If you don't, you're dead. So if you have a nervous system, it all responds in different ways. When there's a threat, that threat heightens my fight or flight. Okay? So when I see my work as a threat, my fight or flight kicks in. And it primes my muscles and my cardiovascular system for physical activity, physical work, not mental work. Physical work. When I perceive something as an opportunity, my nervous system heightens my ability to think and to work. So what happens when I see an opportunity? I'm able to think clearly. I can speak fluently. I suddenly have better problem-solving skills and planning skills. I'm able to coordinate information and ideas and then synthesize information and ideas in a creative way so that I have divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking means I'm able to take that one thing, right? Like, this is the right answer on the test. Convergent, that's convergent. Divergent thinking means that I can take this bottle and think of 400 different ways of using it and creatively. That's divergent thinking. I diverge from the one thing. Okay. So that's when I see things as an opportunity. Here's the problem. When I respond in a fight or flight fashion to any challenge that I perceive that doesn't require fight or flight, what happens to me? Well, I start to detect threats in my environment, which makes me easily distractible. So when I was a bouncer, all of these things were really convenient to have. I needed to be easily distracted because I needed to scan the room and be aware of everything around me. The quicker response time, what does that happen? It makes me impulsive. I'm able to react quickly. That's really important when you're in that situation. It changes our muscles and our cardiovascular system. It makes us fidgety and restless. Why? Because when I'm panicked, I need to be fidgety and restless. And it also makes me inattentive and hyperactive, because that's what we need when we're under threat. So imagine if we enter into work and see our work as a threat, we are creating ADHD. All of us have ADHD when our amygdala is operating, when our fight or flight kicks in. This is, I believe, one of the reasons why so many children are diagnosed with ADHD in our society today, because so many of them see education as a threat, because we've stopped teaching them divergent thinking methods and everything has become convergent. This is the answer. This is the one way to do it. You have to memorize it, and if you don't do it right, you fail, and you're not worth anything. Okay? If you ever want to watch really great stuff on this, please watch, God rest him, he just died this year, Sir Ken Robinson. Sir Ken Robinson did a series of TED Talks on things like, is education killing creativity in our schools? He is, beyond a doubt, to me, one of the finest speakers I've ever heard on education. Sir Ken Robinson. I'll put a link to his in the on my website so that you can watch him. So, anyway, the cause of this mismatch, where I'm trying to focus, but I'm not able, is complaining. So if I complain, I treat work as a threat. What does it do? I either dread, that's worrying, and that refers to the future, like I dread the possibility of failure. Or I regret, like I start to ruminate on the past, and I regret, I wish I studied math harder, I wish I had done that other work better, I wish I had actually paid attention in Spanish class, things like that. So that refers to the past. And it creates what's called a negative processing bias. So I become biased to negative processing. And I become biased to negative processing towards work. And actually, the more I do it, the more I start to do that towards everything. So now everything in life becomes a threat. Every person, every relationship, everything becomes a threat to me. And the brain picks up on that negativity. So our brains, our brains are kind of like our front yard. If you keep walking over the same part, you tread a path. And after a while, those paths are well worn, and it's difficult to not tread on those paths. The negative outcomes the brain picks up on negative outcomes, and the negative always will outcompete the positive. That's just the way our brain is. Why? Because our brain is wired to survive. And survival is always going to opt for negativity so that it can protect itself. So if I live in a way where I'm constantly doing that, then it means I'm constantly negative, I'm constantly suspicious, and I'm constantly doubting. Now imagine what suspicion, doubt, and nervousness does to relationships, to your faith. Right? That's why most people, what's their default? I don't understand something the church teaches. I doubt it. It must not be true. Right? So we go into this Cartesian doubt all of a sudden. I reject it and I'm suspicious of it. That comes from modern man and woman living in that negativity. Our brain has been created this way. And that also creates anxiety disorders, ADHD, ADD, things like that. Okay, so obstacle number 2, multitasking. Once again, our society has been basically created in the last 20 years or less, the last 15 years, to constantly multitask. And I find this very interesting is when digital technology came out, and God bless it, I use it all the time. But when mobile technology came out, especially things like the BlackBerry, the iPhone, all those things, what we did is we said, this is this amazing technology, but no one ever really asked, is it good for us? We just immediately adopted it and it became part of our culture. But what does it do? Well, multitasking trains us to lower our threshold for switching tasks. And we should avoid this with everything. The only thing that we should multitask with is like driving. You gotta make decisions, you gotta shift your car if you have a standard, you gotta steer, your feet are moving in multiple ways. That's pretty much the only thing we should multitask in. And if you notice, no one's ever paying full attention on the road if they're doing all the things they're supposed to be doing driving. And then if the phone comes out, forget it. Or the mascara and the phone and the driving and the cigarettes and the whatever, all these different things. You look at some people, I'm like, hey, bozo, stop with the juggling act. So, it leads us to treat challenges in our work as a cue for task switching. So this is what happens. If you notice, this happens in the grocery store. I'm in the grocery store. I have a moment of silence. I don't know anybody here. I pick up my phone. And everyone's there. This is what happens. I can't do one thing without a distraction. I'm rewriting my neural pathways to multitask and to be constantly distracted more and more and more. And my threshold gets lower and lower and lower. So we train ourselves to keep unfinished business from the past and the future always ready at hand. I can always go back to this. Now, you know, I don't know about you, but like sometimes I go to prayer and suddenly I'm always thinking of what I should have done better or didn't do or what I need to do later today. Why? Because I've trained my brain in a moment of silence to think about that. So that leads to prayer, meditation, whatever it might be. I'm used to switching tasks back and forth without ever completing anything. And so what happens when we sit with a whole list of tasks that vies for our attention, it leads us to continue to multitask in a never-ending cycle. And nothing ever gets done, which creates deeper threats to complain about and distract me and to be afraid of. So the vicious cycle continues. The third obstacle towards happiness, to working well, is not challenging ourselves sufficiently in a task. Hear this with kids a lot. I don't want to do this, I'm bored. Or, oh my gosh, it's too much. So there's this inadequate challenge. Now, the inadequate challenge of not challenging ourselves enough, it keeps mindful attention from ever gaining any sort of momentum in our work. There's no sort of momentum that builds. And then we easily get bored, which means that we are distracted. That's why we like sports so much. Sports is a series of tasks I must perform, but there's a certain element of competitiveness in it. And when I have that competitiveness, I'm focused. So like if you're playing a difficult board game, for instance, and you sit there with a group of friends, cards, you see people in a state of flow. I mean, they're really focused. Why? Because there's an element of challenge that goes into it. You and I as human beings were made for challenge. We're made to find that opportunity and challenge. Why? Because adrenaline is the body's natural way of engaging in challenge. Adrenaline, by its very nature, enhances our mental powers so we can reach our highest levels of flow. It's one of the reasons why coffee is so popular. It's a neuroenhancer. Why, up until recently, smoking was so popular amongst especially intellectuals, because it's a neuroenhancer. What does it do? It signals the body to produce adrenaline, which enhances the brain's ability to think. So, working with inadequate levels of challenge, it's kind of like a pole vaulter. Okay? Every time a pole vaulter goes to vault, they want to set that bar just a little bit higher. So like when I go to the gym, if I really want to see muscle growth, I need to slowly add just a little bit more weight every time onto the bar. Well, it's the same kind of thing with my work. If I'm not adding just a little bit more of a challenge, I easily get bored with my tasks. And then I fall back into the other two obstacles. There's no intensity that's called for. Therefore, no adrenaline is produced that enhances my performance. And then I never raise the bar, and that's where I keep from a growth mindset. All right, so what do? I'm gonna go through 5 different stages, okay? The 5 different stages, I'm gonna talk about priming. How do I prime myself for good work? Then I'm gonna talk about, basically think ready, set, go. Ready, reframing my situation. Set, recollecting. Recollecting is gonna be mindfulness. And then go, that's the challenging of myself, which is gonna then allow me to enter into the state of flow. How does that sound? Does that sound good? Have I lost you yet? No, you understand me. Okay, good. Thank you. This is great. This is good. I'm so excited about this. I love this. You know why I'm excited about this? Because I use this methodology in my work, and I get more done in 2 hours in my day than I used to get done in a week. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I pray. I do my holy hour. I'll say mass, unless I have a later mass. I go to the gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I come home and I work for 2 hours. I'm done with almost all my work by lunch. Except emails, because they're never ending, and I don't care about them. They're not like, just because someone can send me a message doesn't obligate me to immediately respond to every one of them. And so warning. But that's it. I get all my homilies, all the things I'm writing, the book that I'm working on, all those things, usually in about 2 or 3 hours a day. And it's just so much fun. So like, I promise you this works because I use it, and I used to not use it, and then when I started using it, my life changed. It's like finding Jesus in my work. I grew up my whole life, sanctify your work, make your work holy. Well, because I didn't know how to work well, I didn't know how to make my work holy. Now, I just try to work better, and I make mistakes all the time. But if I work well, then I go, Jesus, I give this to you. Boom, done, now it's sanctified. It doesn't take much more than that. Okay, what do we do? Setting the stage. So I'm gonna set the stage, okay. Attaining flow requires that I set the stage to enter into the state of it. So this is what I'm gonna challenge you to do. To do what's called a golden hour every day. You can call it whatever you want. This is your hour, okay? Tony Robbins would call it the hour of power and things like that. This is gonna be your priming, you're setting the stage. It's the key to working well. And I have to be 100% committed to it. The more you can ritualize it, the better. And it's preferably you do this at the beginning of the day. Begin your day really well. It's breaking this task into smaller tasks, okay? So, priming. The time of day is important. Your first hour of work, if you can do it early in the morning, before you're distracted, before you have the worries and concerns of the day, it makes it easier to fall into a consistent routine. And the routine that precedes it impacts it all as well. So it's the morning routine. It's a priming method that prepares me for optimal efficiency. So what are the 2 things that we should do in the morning? The first is, and you're gonna be like, you gotta be kidding me, my parents were right? Get right out of bed. Get right out of bed in the morning. I'll explain why you should get right out of bed in the morning. Here's why. When I stay in bed, staying in bed is a form of avoidance. What happens? I wake up and I'm hiding under my covers. What do I do when I hide? I'm avoiding. So my body language to myself is immediately telling me myself that I'm avoiding the day. It physically frames the day as a threat to avoid. So now my day is a threat to me, rather than an opportunity to be jumped into. So I don't jump into the opportunity, I'm hiding from it. And what happens, like when we wake up, when you and I wake up, we're all in a state of cognitive distortion. We're like, kind of rub the sleep out of our eyes. It happens to all of us. And if I get moving, that wears off in a minute or 2. But if I don't get moving, that cognitive distortion can last the entire time I'm in bed. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps adding to the rumination, and the distortions remain and actually grow. Staying in bed gives me time to worry. It dissipates my intention, and it changes my mind and starts to move my mind to unfinished business. So I start to get very panicky and worried, and it ends up vying for my attention. So I'm going to give you 11 reasons why you should get right out of bed in the morning. Okay, this is great. If you have kids, teach your kids this in a way a kid can understand. So when I jump right out of bed, what does it do? Well, it prevents snoozing, which puts an end to quality of sleep. Like, once your alarm goes off, you're not going to get quality sleep anymore. That's it. Like, it's done. You're awake. You might go back to sleep, but it's not going to be quality sleep. You're not going to enter into REM like that. You're not going to have deep sleep. The second, we get right out of bed so we can prevent cognitive distortion from our sleep, which would lead to negative framing, negative rumination, negative worrying. Okay. When I get right out of bed, to decrease time spent in the default mode of thinking while lying in bed. That's my default mode. I think, I worry. I do it to decrease the incentive power of tiredness. So like tiredness gives me an incentive just to be more tired. When I get right out of bed, I lose that incentive and it starts to energize me. It prevents to prevent seeding the wake-up time with negative appraisals by dreading. So I fall into dread by staying in bed, and then I start to negatively appraise everything. Those of you who are married might have seen this, like when your spouse stays in bed for much longer, suddenly they become a little more negative, a little more worried, a little more fearful about their day. The complaining starts to elevate a little bit more. We do this, like when you first wake a kid up, especially a teenager, like when I was a teenager, I would wake up and I would immediately, I'd be like, but then went to, I'm so gonna fail this test today. Oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. Like within 5 minutes, I was condemning myself to hell practically. Right? The sixth, to increase the deadline benefit, which improves the efficiency of sleep. So what happens is that, like, if I know I'm getting right out of bed at whatever time you wake up in the morning, let's say I'm waking up at 4:30, but let's say you wake up at like 7 a.m. Okay, you wake up at 7 a.m. Like, I gotta go to bed by 11 because I need to wake up at 7. I'm not gonna wake up at 7:15 or 7:30, I'm not gonna know. So what happens is that I actually fall asleep better when I do that. It physically frames the day as an opportunity. I jump right into the day. I'm like, hey, like this, like, oh, what a beautiful morning, like excited. So to increase the re-entry benefit of the day, it increases self-efficacy by the beginning of the day with a victory. It's like, I had a victory. Like, you know what? My day could totally stink, but I got right out of bed in the morning. Like, began the day with a victory. And you hear people say, like, making your bed also. It's like, those are two victories. I get right out of bed, I make my bed in the morning, guess what? I've begun my day with like this awesome, victorious. Well, if I start with a victory, what happens? We're more likely to build the momentum of a consistent victory. It allows a new preference to take shape. Now I prefer the day rather than yesterday. And it trains me to make moral decisions when no one's looking. That's what virtue is, right? So like no one's watching. Well, maybe you have a spouse that is. But like no one's watching. Like if I don't get up right away, no one's gonna know. But it's what we do when no one's looking that makes us the men and women that we long to be. Virtuous. The second thing we should do, so get right out of bed, and the second thing is intense cardiovascular activity. And there's a reason for this. Our neurons, the neurons in your brain, they're like, look out with the leaves falling, they're like trees without leaves. Okay, so you see all those twigs sticking up from the trees? There's millions of little twigs from our neurons. Chronic stress starts to shave those twigs down. And this makes it harder for our neurons to fire and communicate with each other, which means that my brain's not working optimally when it starts to shave it down. And so what happens, exercise increases the length of the twigs. Intensive exercise, some sort of cold shower also helps, and fasting, what it also does is it lengthens the telomeres at the end of your DNA strands, which allows your neurons to grow even more. So like all those things actually help your brain chemistry work and your central nervous system. So exercise like increases those twigs and it creates richer connections and more powerful neurological function. And so test taking ability increases, Self-control increases. That's why you'll notice that great leaders, like military leaders, CEOs, successful parents, if you ask them, like, what do you do in the morning? One of the main parts of their daily ritual is exercise. Usually intensive cardiovascular, high-intensity training. So for the best result, run for 15 minutes with 3 30-second sprints. So you don't have to exercise for long. Just put on your shoes and get out there and go for a run for 15 minutes. And then during that time, sprint all out. 30 seconds. Then you say, well, I can't sprint. My feet aren't working. My knees aren't working. Well, do something that's going to elevate that heart rate and get you to about 75% or higher max on your heart rate. All right. So, but you do it right after waking up, and it does amazing things because working in threat mode is the main cause of distractibility and impulsivity. And so that's activated by our thoughts. And so if I complain or dread or avoid something for emotional reasons, this helps me. This helps me to calm me down, helps me get right out of bed and calm me down. All right, ready. Ready, set, go. Remember? Ready. So now I'm primed, I'm ready to go. What do? Ready? Just like a racer. Get someone who's racing. Okay. This reframing works against the first obstacle I talked about, which is complaining, that negative attitude. Reframing the task at hand. Deliberately discovering the opportunity that's at hand. What's the opportunity that I have here? Notice that, as I said before, notice that people who complain are the most stressed. Like, think of the people in your office or at school. Think of fellow students. The people who complain the most are the most miserable. No one wants to be around them. You know, like just the people that always complain, they look for the negative. That's why what I'm basically going to explain to you here is how to avoid misery. Like 98% of our misery comes from within ourselves. Once in a while we have a cross that's imposed on us or something like that. So reframing changes your attitude towards the challenge at hand. We automatically resist demands on our effort. It's just part of us. Like we want to avoid it, right? I want to avoid effort. I want to relax. It's just part of my laziness. It's part of our problems. So we complain, and this negative attitude activates our internal threat detector, and it leads us, as I said, to being distractible, impulsive, restless. Basically, this is what antidepressants try to chemically change. We actually, many of us, not everyone, obviously people need to be on antidepressants sometimes, but we're such a medicated culture because very often what happens is that rather than like putting in the work and understanding how our bodies work, we just want to take a pill that'll allow us to continue to live the negative lives that we have. Just like people say, well, give me a pill that'll take away, all the problems I have with my diabetes and things. Studies are indicating more and more and more that like with intense fasting and low carbohydrate diets, most people with like lower types of diabetes can really transform their lives. But we would rather just have a pill. So, but now we can put the work in. So change, and of course the medical industry doesn't want us to do that. Why? Because they make a lot of money off these drugs. So what I'm telling you is all free. It's all free. Just get up in the morning. Right? So change the negative processing bias. All cognitive behavioral therapy that people do, it's all based on this, transforming our negative processing bias. So we change course by deliberately discovering the good of the task at hand. What's the good of this task that I have to do? See it as an opportunity. This is why you see the power of gratitude. I'm so thank you I can take this test. Thank you that I can, because a lot of people don't get the education I get. Thank you, Lord, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Lord, that I get to do this marketing report today and present it in front of the CEO and the board. Thank you, because I get to do amazing things. This carries over into every activity in life because it becomes an opportunity to work at my best. Think about that. If I enter into my work thinking I'm going to be able to make a difference in the world by reframing that, what happens is reframing the opportunity turns off our threat detector and it activates our higher level opportunity frame. And this shifts things. It shifts everything. So I'm able to resist impulses and distractions. Temptations and fears radically decrease. Everything radically decreases like that. Because the highest part of the human brain, the highest part of the neocortex, the human neocortex, is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. It's right here, in the center of your forehead. And this responds to deliberate appraisals. It's the appraisal center in my brain, okay? If we view something as a threat, the appraisal center shuts off, sends adrenaline to my amygdala, and the amygdala is ready for fight or flight. But if I'm able, that's when I'm in threat mode. But if I switch to opportunity mode, what happens is that our appraisal cortex activates, it sends a calming impulse to my amygdala, and I'm in opportunity mode. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I think of that song from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Up come the ashes, up from the ashes, grow the roses of success, right? You look at it now, all of a sudden we're Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, a great movie, right? Because it's Dick and Bob Sherman wrote the music. Everyone thinks it was a Disney movie, but it's not. It was after they left Disney that they wrote that, and they did that it was a really disturbing movie. But you think most Disney movies actually, old ones, are able to see the opportunity mode, right? In every job that must be done, there is an element of fun. You find the fun and snap. The job's a game, right? Right? And every task you undertake becomes a piece of cake, a lark, a spree, it's very clear you see. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. They knew what they were talking about. And once you're able to see that, then you're able to use your mind. And you can say things like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Or you can say it backwards, which is docialiespisticfragicalirufus, but that's going a bit too far, don't you think? Right? Like, you can have fun with life. And you might say, is this guy on lithium? No, I'm just finding the opportunity in teaching this class right now. And that's what we can do. Now think about temptation too. When we fall into temptation, it's usually because we're in threat mode and we're looking for an escape. But if I find opportunity mode, okay, I have this particular temptation that the evil one is placed in front of me. And I can either look at it, no, or I can go, what's the opportunity here? I get to grow in strength by fighting this. And what's that going to do? It's going to help me help this person and that person. It's going to help me help myself. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be free from the sin, whatever it is. Now all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I can do it. Like, we're excited about it. All right, if I deliberately assess something as that opportunity, then I go into what you call a growth mindset. And this is Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, or her mindset book. It's excellent. To deliberately discover the opportunities of work. Every task is an opportunity for growth. Everything, even bending over and picking up the sock. Because you ever notice there's always the sock, right? Like in the laundry room, you put everything in the basket and there's always that one blasted sock that falls up. And even just picking that up, what's the opportunity here? Okay, when I start to see the opportunity and I do it over and over and over, that develops what Angela Duckworth in her book called grit, okay? Successful people have passion and perseverance because they see the opportunity in things. Okay, so you will have passion and purpose and perseverance when you start to challenge your brain to see the opportunity. And it's fueled by a growth mindset. So there's two different ways that I can do this, and one is not good and one is good. The one that's not good is what we would call passive challenge. This is how most of us approach things. Easily. I got it, I'm just gonna speak to a student mind here. I gotta do this paper. I gotta do this paper tonight. I gotta do it means it's a threat to me and my comfort. What is it gonna do? Threats lead to procrastination and dread, feeling overwhelmed. If I feel overwhelmed, it's a good sign I'm in passive challenge mode, okay? And in this moment, people often try to reduce the challenge. We try to reduce it usually by falling into temptation, avoidance methods, overeating, anything like that. And that reduction zeroes out the active challenge, and they start to feel overwhelmed, and I fall into a vicious cycle of being overwhelmed and trying to reduce it. So I will say, like, one of the most classic, all vices, I would argue that all vices falling into vice is challenge reduction. Okay, so if I have a vice, I'm trying to reduce challenges, right? So overeating will often be just that, right? A common one of avoiding work, sadly today in our society, is pornography. So what happens is that someone sees their work as a threat. They say, I gotta do this work. But they don't want to do it, so they say, I'm going to escape the challenge of life. I'm going to detach from the challenge. I'm going to look at this thing, do this thing. But that increases passive challenge once again. And once again, the person becomes overwhelmed and the cycle continues. And that's usually why in those kinds of vices, it's not like a one-time thing. It usually happens a bunch of times until the cycle repeats itself enough and somebody says, I'm going to get out of the cycle. Okay, so how does someone fight this? Active challenge mode. Actively doing it. I get to do this paper. I get to do this paper, and it will benefit me this way. It'll benefit somebody else that way. It's going to help me develop a skill that is going to help me in this way, or more importantly, help somebody else. By the way, the higher the call, the more compelling of an argument it is. So that's why service and love, that's why you'll notice people who fall in love usually are able to quite actively pull themselves out of old vices. Because what happens is they fall in love and now they have a reason for doing this work, a reason for going to work, a reason for loving. So that leads once again to a growth mindset. You think about this. People often say, I got to prepare a meal for the family tonight. I used to love cooking. I hate cooking. Why do they hate cooking now, but they used to love cooking? Because they used to see it as an opportunity to grow in creativity, to create new tastes, to grow culture, to transform their family, to create a reason to be able to sit together, to dine. Rather than feeding ourselves, we dine together, right? So we create an atmosphere of love in our home. So that was the opportunity. What happens? They stop seeing it as an opportunity, they saw it as a challenge, now they dread it. So when we see it once again as that opportunity, amazing things can happen. I get to grow in my skills, my virtue grows. It leads me to understand my deeper motivations. I get to be someone that builds my family, my community, my culture. So here's some questions to ask yourself to reframe. The questions like, what would it look like if I did my best work in this task, whatever the task is? How can I grow the most by challenging myself in this task? Why do I ultimately want to work at my best right now? Sometimes that's a great clue, a key. And as a college chaplain, I often would say this to people. If they would come to me and complain about their work, I'd go, do you like what you're studying? Not really. I'm just like, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars every year to study something you hate. Like, what are you doing? Or someone goes, well, I hate my job. Well, have you allowed that to be a challenge in challenge mindset that then helps you to go find another job? Or are you just in complaining mode and you hate yourself, you hate your life? So why do I ultimately want to work at my best right now? And finally, how is this task giving me a chance to grow or to practice? So any questions that use the words practice, growth, opportunity, that's a good start. So ask yourself those questions. Try to reframe everything, not just your work, everything that way. How does taking this cold shower right now? How does going to the gym right now? How does talking to this person right now? How does cooking this meal or eating this salad that I really hate, whatever it might be? How is that an opportunity? And the more you do it, the more you train your brain to be in opportunity mode all the time. All right, one of the big ones is prayer, right? What does going to prayer right now allow me to do? What will that do to my life? Finding that positive in it. All right. And then the third one, recollecting. Settling your mind. This is mindfulness. We've already done this a lot, so I won't go too much into this. Clear it through the practice of mindfulness, because natural distractions will arise, and they reveal unfinished business in the mind. So that we really have two attentional systems, okay? The first is task attention. This doesn't experience distractions. It just experiences interruptions. But we should just give those, like when I'm doing a task and there's an interruption, I should give it my full attention and then go back to what I was doing. Okay, so someone walks in, this is great. I remember my father telling me this when he was younger. What is a great act of love? This is back when people used to read like actual newspapers. What's a great act of love for your children when you're there and you're reading the newspaper on Sunday and your kid comes in and goes, Daddy, can I ask you something? And you go, yes. All right, that's my attentional system, right? I switch from one task to another, and then I pick up my other task and I go back. I'm not going, yeah, what is it? What do you need? Yeah, sure. Why? Now I'm not paying attention to either thing. Okay? So this is really going to help us to overcome this, your attentional system. The other deals with, like, so there's the task attention and then the default mode. Your default mode is the one that's going from the past and the future. It's not allowing you to stay in the present. And that's the default mode. And it arises when your attention is not fully engaged. And that's really your source of distraction. And we can be aware of that, attentional system we're in. And how can I be that? By training my task attention system. When I find myself in default mode, I gently return myself back. Remember all the mindfulness practices we've done? I focus on my breath. Why am I doing this? It's not so that I can reach nirvana. I'm focusing on my breath. I'm focusing on the present moment. And then when I start to go to the past or start to go to the future, I just gently bring myself back to the present. What I'm doing is training my neuropathways to be in task attention mode so that I'm not going off into default mode. I'm retraining my brain to be able to control distraction. And guess what? If you don't do it, you will never get better at it. It's like lifting weights. The more weight I lift, the stronger I get. If I don't do it, I don't get stronger. End of story. So the more mindfulness I do, the better I'm able to deal with distractions. So when you're distracted in prayer, why does that happen? Because you didn't train your mind. So if we keep training our mind with mindfulness, we'll be able to recollect and put ourselves into our work. The fourth thing, go. So ready, set, go. How do I go? By challenging myself. This is the most important step. This determines the intensity of my work. It determines how I'm going to enter into the state of flow. This gives you adrenaline. It brings you into this effortless attention, and it frees you from distraction and impulses. So focus plus momentum equals flow. I'm going to say that again because it's very important. This is the mathematics of good work. Focus plus attention equals the state of flow. And the way we do this is giving each task at hand our full attention. So working in sequential unitasking rather than in multitasking. What that does is it allows me to establish pace, okay? So what do? By having a challenging amount of work that I seek to complete in a set amount of time. And this becomes an art. At first we're like, maybe we'll challenge ourselves too much or too little. But you start to understand what it is you're able to do. It's like the pole vaulter, remember? You got to produce the adrenaline, and you got to set that bar just a little bit higher each time. So it calling forth our highest intensity to finish it. We specify the task. What exactly do I have to do in this hour of work? Like, write it out. What is the goal of this hour of work? Specify the time you're going to do it in. So maybe it's the whole hour, maybe it's 4 tasks you're going to do in a half hour. And you're just going to do it. Set a deadline. See, when I set myself a deadline and I break my deadline down, I work harder. It's why a lot of people procrastinate and they just say, I'm going to do my paper or I'm going to get this project done on the last day before it's due. Because they actually inherently know in their mind what's going to generate a good outcome. People are like, I work better under pressure. You actually do. But when you wait till the last minute, what happens is that you're not only creating pressure, but you're creating the anxiety that comes with the possibility of failure. So if you remove it from the last day, then the possibility of failure is not there because you can always, catch up and do stuff with extra time. But what it does is it allows you to set a challenge. So set the amount of time and set a timer. We should always work with a timer. And over time, you can know what you can and can't do. But you work through it with the adrenaline, and that's where most of us are able to perform really well. And when we're able to do all those things, when we ready, set, go, when we reframe, stop from negative to positive, when I set myself with mindfulness, mindfully entering into the task, and I'm training myself always in mindfulness, and then when I finally am able to work through those tasks like that, that's when I enter into flow. And we go into this when we have something that we love. And we don't have to love the task. Like a lot of us don't like our job. Or we love aspects of our job. So for instance, I would say that most teachers love teaching. That's why they're in it. But most teachers don't like grading papers or grading tests, right? They would rather do the creative stuff. They'd rather figure out how to help Johnny or Susie be a better student, things like that. Why? Because they're motivated by love. I love my students. So that has to be, love is what we give ourselves in our task. If I love it, then I'm going to strive to do it more. And challenges help us to make the most of the task. And we don't have to love everything we're doing. We don't have to love every aspect of our work. But why we're doing it is what we should love. Not that we have to do something. Why am I doing it? Like, why are you in school? Like, it's going to lead to what I'm passionate about. If someone's studying something and they're not passionate about it, and they don't love it, or they don't love aspects of it, then what the hell is the point? You know, it's just like in any kind of work. Why are you doing this? What's your why? That's the root of sanctifying my work. When we talk about making my work holy and offering it to God, what's the motivation between, like every actor has to ask that, right? You step on the stage and goes, what's my motivation in this scene? They ask the director. And the director tells you, because it's what's motivating your character. What's your motivation in this scene in life? William Shakespeare says, the play is the thing. Okay, this is your play. Your life is the stage. What's your thing? Why do you live that? What's your why? That's the root of it. Because when my why is, the answer to that is my love for God, then everything becomes sanctifiable. I can make anything holy if my why is that I love God, that God gave me this task to do, that God gave me this life in this moment. You know, that life is this poem, and I am going to, as the old poem goes, and I'm going to contribute a verse. That's the whole point of it. It's out of a love for God or a love for someone else. Like, why are you doing this job? See, I can make my job holy if I don't like my job, if I'm doing it to support my family. Why? Because I love my family. Okay, or that I love myself. Like, I'm doing this because, like, this is good for me. And I deserve to have a life that's good for me. That I don't have to be a miserable wretch. But I can't always be doing something that I love. So that can continue to a discontinuous flow. Because we're trying to love what we're doing, not why we're doing it. I think that's the reason why most Americans are unhappy in their jobs. When you look at the statistics, is because they've lost their why. So when I learn to love the process of working at my best, and I see the good of it, like when I work at my best, whatever the task is, it's making me a happier person. Then all of a sudden, this learning how I'm going to do it, then we become curious. How can I do this better? How can I love my job better? We throw ourselves into it. It's like, how can I be a better teacher? How can I be a better preacher? How can I be a better... And then it's like everything, I'm never bored because I can always like be improving, continuing in education. And that's how I achieve independence from specific content of the work. Like I can be independent of the content of the work and do it out of love. And this keeps us in a state of flow continuously. And when someone's really living this way, literally all of life is flow. All of life is love. This is the way Jesus was. Jesus, whatever he did, was in the state of flow. Because everything was for the love of the Father. Why have I come? So that you may know the Father. So when he worked for 30 years, he was on 33 years. 33 years. Only 3 years did he do any of the stuff that we read about in the Bible. 30 years of his life, he worked as a carpenter. Do you think he was miserable for 30 years? He's like, I need a career change. I think I'm going to go do this messianic bit. No. He was loving his work. Like he found the attentiveness. Why? Because he was he through whom all things were created was recreating the very material universe that he created. And so why was he doing it? Out of love. So when I learned how to work that way, whatever my job is, whether we're making something or we're doing something that seems like I'm just a cog in the giant governmental machine, every cog is holy if it's done with the why. And this allows us to use the fullness of our intelligence to become smarter in ways by challenging ourselves, to incorporate my ideals into every task. It leads to an easier way of working with practice, and what? With less anxiety. And so we pay attention to, paying attention doesn't require all my effort. That's what flow allows. And I'm no longer distractible or impulsive. I work smarter and harder with higher motives. I begin to look for more ideals that can be applied to every situation. So now life becomes more about growing in our ideals. And the highest ideals for each task, which are the key to sanctifying work, the key to finding joy and holiness, is by entering into what you would call this final stage of vital engagement, where the ultimate reasons for my life are brought into the smallest tasks. And you know who gets this? I think a lot of times, maybe not a lot, sometimes you find really self-absorbed grandparents. But I would say that my main experience with grandparents, when I watch my parents with my nieces and nephews, they were always attentive to us, as attentive as you can be with 7 kids. But now we have 15 grandkids, and I see my mom does these tests that you would think she'd be so tired of, my dad too. And what happens is it's just full of love. Grandparents, they do the most insignificant things. They don't get thanked for it. And yet they have such fulfillment because they do it out of just love of the other, for the sake of the other. That's vital engagement. It's the ideals that guide their behavior. We work because of the why. So I leave you with this class. What's your why? If you're anxious, if you have trouble being mindful in your life, any of the things that I've talked about here, engage or disengage you, my question I want to leave you with, the one to bring your prayer and bring your work is, what's your why? For everything. You will never run out of things to pray about if you ask that one question. What's your why? With that, I thank you for being in this class. I thank you for watching it. I thank you for the bravery of being able to deal with your own anxieties, your fears, your worries, your hopes, your dreams. Of being here, those of you who come here, those of you at home, those of you who have been venturing out of your house of trying this, I can't tell you it's beautiful for me to hear these emails. I've gotten a couple of emails I'm a heretic, I'm evil, I'm promoting Buddhism, crazy stuff. But if you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, I don't want to have anything to do with your emails, thanks. But I've gotten a lot of great emails of people just saying, I tried this one thing you said. By the way, I didn't make any of this up. So it's not me. I'm just telling you what I've learned. But I've gotten some beautiful letters and emails of people saying, this little thing transformed my life. That's beautiful. And if you've experienced anything like that, please share it with someone. Because there's all these little nuggets and tidbits that you just get into a great conversation with someone, you can transform their life with one little thing. And you know what? You might lead them to ask that question. What's your why? Now I'm going to tell you a couple of the classes I'm thinking of teaching beyond from this. And if you have an opinion, someone's like, oh my gosh, totally need that. Or please, not that. Okay, these are just some things I'm passionate about that I would like to teach you over the next however long God wants me to be here. I would like to do one on the via pulchritudinis, or the way of beauty. Talk about beauty and aesthetics. What is the beautiful? How does the beautiful encourage us, engage us? How does the transcendental of beauty, talk about the transcendentals, the good, the true, the one, and the beautiful? I would say that beauty is the most important. It's the first entryway to the others. Those are aspects of God. I'd like to teach about beauty. We would go into art, sacred art, secular art, things like that. I might teach a separate class on art and art history. I'd like to do a class called The Really Real, R-E-E-L. So the really real cinema through the Catholic optic. So we'd watch secular films and discuss them through the Catholic optic. Because I do not like Christian films. I find 99.9% of them are terrible. And there's a reason for that, because they're made by preachers, not by artists. I want to watch good art, talk about good art. Scalable spiritual direction is another one I'd like to do. Most people want spiritual direction, and most people need the same kind of stuff for spiritual direction, but there's just not enough spiritual directors. So to be able to give you a class on what are the basics of spiritual direction you can practice, and then bring to your confessions and ask your confessor to be able to help you through them without having to sit down and do intensive spiritual direction. The vast majority of human beings need that. Church history. I'd like to call it, you think it's bad now? Church history. Great autobiographies of saints. So go through some of the great autobiographies of the saints. That one's new. The book I'm writing right now, as I've mentioned to you, An Actor Prays, and then going through the different acting methods and how they can be employed as exercises to help us pray better. One I called Liberal Tapas. So you know what tapas are, like small plates? And so I'd like to actually kind of like take a little like six-pack jaunt through the liberal arts and just go through a couple of the major works of the liberal arts. You know, Milton and Dante, Divine Comedy and things like that, maybe a couple of philosophers and some poetry, just to give, because a lot of people have technical degrees, but they never actually like got engaged in the Western tradition of the liberal arts, which is beautiful. I'd like to do one called Evangelization, a primer, and talk about like how do you evangelize people, somebody, how do we engage a non-believing culture? In the beginning, Genesis, I'd like to do one on Genesis, and another one on the gospel of whatever that year happens to be, that gospel. I'd like to do one on spiritual warfare and unbound, how do I deal with the devil? I'd like to do one on the Mass, and then one on holy, happy, and thriving marriages and families, and then one on the Beatitudes. So that's like what I'm working now. In the future, we'll be doing 6-packs or 4-packs. So, I don't know, maybe we'll have wine and cheese after or something, but 6-packs and 4-packs, this is the longest class I will teach, mainly because it was so robust. With that being said, God bless you, and please know that for you and all the people that have come here, all the people who watch and listen all around the world, today I offered Mass for you, your intentions, and for your anxiety. And I hope that God will give you peace. God bless you. This is your last chance to ask me any questions. So if anybody has any questions? Any? Yes? No, I'll announce it. Give me a couple of weeks. I'm going to take a break. I need to actually like write the class. So yeah, that's I am teaching RCIA here, and I'm doing all the RCIA classes, and they're all available on my podcast. And so I do want to encourage you, like right now, if you want more, right now I'm going through a comprehensive catechesis of the entire Catholic faith on RCIA. And so it's on my website and it's on my podcast. I really want to encourage you to watch that because, you know, it's people like, I'm teaching on a college level because a lot of people, like most of us like have, well, you know, not all of us, but a lot of us didn't have the ability to go to a Catholic high school or go to a Catholic university or continue our official education in the faith, in the Catholic religion. And so what happens is a lot of times, like after 8th grade, right around confirmation, people just don't have any more official things. So imagine if the last English class or history class or art or any kind of class you took was 8th grade. Could you say that you were proficient in your knowledge of said subject? No. Well, especially with our faith. If the last real learning that I did was in 8th grade, probably don't. So, and I think a lot of people, I find a lot of Catholics think they know their faith, and then when they start to learn about it, they're like, oh my gosh, I completely didn't even know that. Because our faith is very rich and it's very deep. And even though the simplest of people can understand it and live it profoundly, sometimes even better, those of us that have intellectual ability, it's a beautiful thing to be able to challenge ourselves to grow more deeply and richly. So even though this class is finishing, RCIA continues, and you're going to get about 20 classes in that. So I hope you listen to that. Any other questions? Yes?
I'd like to say thank you for your time and thank you for doing this.
Oh, sure.
I
Glad you
love your passion. This is priceless.
Good. I'm glad you like it.
Can't wait for your next class.
I can't wait either.
My question is, you mentioned about multitasking. I mean, now in this world that we are living in, we always end up multitasking.
Yeah,
But
multitasking.
correct me if I'm wrong, what I take from what you say, I can take multitasking and follow what you said. You said, focus plus attention equals flow. So like, you'd say there's a parent who's reading the newspaper and the child comes
Put
and
it down.
interrupts. So he's trying to multitask as well, right?
No, so that's successive unitasking. Okay, so if I multitask, what happens is I'm reading something and then I'm like talking. You do this, people do this all the time with their phone. And you start talking to someone, they pull out their phone, and they're like, yeah, yeah, sure. They're not paying attention. They're actually not paying attention to the text or you, right? And so successive unitasking is, I'm going to put this down, because there's a distraction that's come to me. I'm going to put it down, I'm going to deal with it, and then I'm going to pick it back up, and I'm going to go back to this, okay? That's task attention, okay? That's being intentional about attention. All right. Multitasking is I'm trying to do many things at once. Okay. There are certain jobs where that's necessary, but it's still not able. Teachers, for instance, often they have to deal with 30 kids in front of them, and they have to deal with all these different things. And teachers get better at it, but they'll all say, like, at the end of the day, that's why teachers' days, I think, are shorter, because they'll go crazy if they have to do that all. Air traffic controllers, pilots, people like that, people who have to do many things at once. But really what you're not actually multitasking, you're just rapidly, successfully unitasking. See what I mean? It's just you can switch back and forth. Moms are really good at much better usually than men, usually. Because you just have to do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, try to have a deep conversation and tie your shoelace. Like, that'll even distract you. So if you want to learn how to do that, like, sit and tie your shoelace, and then go to the person, and then turn and do this thing. And it might seem like in a world that multitasks, it's going to be, people are like, come on, get it done. But it's like, no, you're actually living, it's like, I'm living sanity right now. Allow me to have my sanity. You're the one that's crazy. Look how you're reacting. Any other questions? Your last opportunity to ask a question in class. Yes? Is maladaptive neuropathways a disease or a behavior? I'm not a neurobiologist or a neuropsychologist, but I will venture it. I will risk an opinion on it. As one who's like studied enough of these things, I would say it's behavioral. Okay. Now, are there aspects of it? Sure. So the addictive mind, for instance, the addictive mind. There's aspects that are genetically addictive, but then behavior. So it's both and. Behavior increases that. If that wasn't the case, then you would say that any sort of therapeutic intervention in helping an addict find sobriety would be impossible if it was all genetic, like if it was all neurological, right? So you might not be able to fully rewire the addict's brain, but you can do an awful lot to reestablish neuropathways. Obviously, neuroplasticity, the ability to be able to do it, like there's a lot more neuroplasticity when you're younger. As we get older, we don't have as much neuroplasticity. And so something that we really need to do is continue to exercise that neuroplasticity, doing the things I was talking about. So for instance, the intense exercise, cryo exposure, so exposing oneself to the cold and the heat, thermogenesis, things like that. Fasting does amazing things to increase, as I said, the telomeres, to be able to rework the cellular autophagy, or the ability for the the body's cells to be able to regenerate. So that's cellular autophagy. All of those things are incredibly important. So I'm throwing this out there, and some people are probably like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But just trust me, fast regularly. Like, it's great. The modern scientific world is like, we've discovered this new thing that religions have known for the last 6,000 years, but like every religion has fasting as part of it. Why? Because like Mama knew, right? Just like, for instance, bone broth increases what? Bone broth, especially chicken and beef bone broth, increases gut bacteria and all that. And where is most of your immune system lodged? Usually in your gut. So the more healthy gut bacteria I have, the healthier my immune system. Why did Mama give you chicken soup, bone broth when you were a kid? Because she knew, even though there was no scientific, right? So things like that, very important. So being able to have all of those things, and you're seeing that grow today. Biohacking, all that kind of stuff is a huge thing. If you're really interested in these kinds of things, I would really recommend Greenfield. I'll put it up on my website. There's a bunch of really great biohackers that are out there who do a lot of like cutting edge stuff on things like that. Tim Ferriss was really involved. He loves those kinds of things. So anyway, I'll put some links up. Yeah.
What kind of fasting do you recommend?
So it depends. It depends on your health. You can do kind of intensive fasting. So what I'll do is once a week I do a 24-hour fast on Fridays usually, only water. Okay, but I find that fasting when people, and this really helps, by the way. Why? Because when you're doing it on a regular basis, especially if you're on a low carbohydrate diet, not only is it good for weight management, but what happens is you're reducing your insulin levels, and so your liver is producing ketones, which then metabolizes fat. When you metabolize the fat, which is why you store fat, your body is using the energy that it's stored, which increases your neurological ability. And so for me, I do 16-8. I fast, I have nothing but water, green tea, and black decaf coffee, 16 hours a day, okay? There we go. Those watching at home, I'm sorry if my mic keeps cutting out, but you can watch it later. So 16 hours a day, nothing, and then 8 hours a day I take in my caloric content. Okay, what that allows you to do is it allows you to have like a better neurogenesis, better cellular autophagy. I do that almost every day except on weekends, like on Sunday, I allow myself to just eat, right? But that's what I do. There's all different fasting regimens. There's a lot of great videos on it. But I do recommend fasting. Obviously, if you're pregnant, if you're things like that, like, right? So women's bodies are a little different than men's, but fasting in general is a phenomenal thing, not just physically, but also religiously, right? What happens? I'm hungry. By the way, the more you fast, the less hungry you get with it because your body shuts off the hunger hormones, right? That's why sometimes you can go a whole day and not eat and go, oh my gosh, I didn't eat anything. I didn't even remember, right? Because your insulin levels weren't spiked the whole time, so you're healthier. Anyway, I would say that kind of fasting is very helpful. And then once in a while, doing a cleanse fast, which is like a water fast for 48 to 72 hours, is also very intense. And that's why the church gives us Advent and Lent, right? To have deeper periods of fasting. That's why the Muslims have Ramadan. That's why the Jews have their fasting, right? And Rosh Hashanah, well, not Yom Kippur, and things like that. Okay. And obviously the Buddhists fast, the Hindus fast. Every major religion fasts is a reason for it. So I highly recommend it for your brain, not just to lose weight, for your brain. But guess what? The cheapest diet. People are like, I'm going to go keto, I'm going to go paleo, I'm going to go this, I'm going to go. How about just don't eat? Take some time not to eat. Guess what? It's free. Free. I'll put some stuff on fasting on my website as well for that last one. Okay? Anything else? Any other questions? Is there? Where? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
How do you consider having fasting
Eschatology. Ooh. No, that's fine. That's fine. I would teach it in English. But yeah, so eschatology, meaning pertaining to the eschaton, which is the four last things or the end of days. So actually, the readings in Mass coming soon to a church near you, so we start to meditate on the end times as we get closer and closer to Christmas, right? So you're going to be hearing a lot about eschatology, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, the four last things, in our homilies. So just listen to my homilies, yes, that I'll be going a little more into depth, and obviously the other priests will all be preaching about that. Okay, but maybe you could do a class, a 4-pack on eschatology. That'd be fun. Okay. Can I give you a blessing? The Lord be with you. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go and announce the gospel of the Lord.